Welcome to the first episode of the Sorare CSC, the Celtic Supporters Club. I am Quinny, your host. I'm the manager of FC Barcelona, and I've been playing Sorare for almost 3 years. And I'm joined by some of the biggest Sorare jungle gyms that I could find to get together on a weekly basis to go through everything Celtic and Sorare. Who are the cards in form? Who are the transfers we're looking at, incomings and outgoings? All that good stuff in between. Joined with me today, and hopefully as regularly as possible we can get everyone's schedules lined up. First of all, on my left here, we've got Etienne, 23, the manager of Club Atletico de Glasgow. He's been playing Sorare for over 2 years himself. Etienne, thanks for joining us, mate. Good to see you.
You're very welcome, Quinny. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm fresh back from Lisbon. I was indeed in the Estadio Nacional paying my respect to the Lisbon Lions only a couple of days ago, so delighted to be here, paying my respect to the current Celtic team in the Web3 stratosphere that is Sorare.
Love it. And beneath Etienne, we've got everyone's favourite whale, as we call him, the Scottish whale, McBride Ace, who's been playing Sorare again for over 2 years, and is the manager of Sexy Sergei FC.
Really
McBride, great to see you, mate.
Hello. Yeah, I probably do need to change that at some point now, but it's left on quite well, so we'll see. We'll see. I think I've still got all these cards as well. I might need to sell them at some point if they're worth anything.
If anyone wants to know, then joke, there's a bit of a meme going around that McBride perpetuates here, but just Google search Sergei Petrov if you want to see big sexy Sergei. And and just beneath me as well, we've got the manager of Red Bull Govan, which is Mark Patrick Rare. Mark, good to see you, my man.
Good evening, guys. Always a pleasure and delighted to be talking about Celtic, unashamedly.
Unashamedly Celtic, unashamedly Sorare. That's what we're kind of wanting to do, because when it comes to this stuff, like Celtic, we all love, we've been at a bunch of Celtic games recently together, actually, watching our teams and our cards, and obviously Celtic, win big games and all that fun stuff as well. And talking to other Sorare players about Celtic, it just feels like bullying, because Celtic are one of the best teams in the world for Sorare, unashamedly, and but there's so much going on. There's so many different dynamics in the teams. There's so many talking points in the team selection every week, as well as, like I alluded to in the intro, when we get into the summer period, a lot of transfer business and looking ahead to a new season and some European competitions and all that fun stuff. So we wanted to have a wee space where we don't care if you're not Celtic fans. This is where the Celtic fans come, and if you don't want to hear it, then you don't need to hear it, because it's all here, basically. So
that's just normal. That's nothing to do with this space, is it?
That's it, man.
That's say that out loud.
So I thought, guys, for the first episode, we would probably just go through the squad, give our kind of 2 cents, what cards we got, what do we think about them. For any Celtic fans maybe coming to this for the first time, what's Sorare, how does this game actually work? Or any Sorare managers who are holding Celtic cards, thinking about getting Celtic cards, they can kind of get our 2 cents for being fans on the ground, as it were, with fingers on the pulses and ears to the ground of, what's kind of going on and moving and shaking and all that fun stuff. Did kind of say in the prep, guys, the goalkeeper spot has a bit of talking points in it. Probably doesn't really come from the bench when we look at guys like Scott Bain or Benjamin Siegrist. Almost got that the wrong way around there. But is there anything you would give out there on the backup goalkeepers we've got at Celtic just to get us rolling?
I think that particularly from a Sorare standpoint, you've got to be looking at Bain potentially moving on in the summer. I think there's a lot of talk, and I'm not going to jump ahead here, but there's a lot of talk of goalkeepers coming to Celtic. So something's got to give there, you would expect, and I'd say Bain would be the favourite. And he's obviously a good goalkeeper. He's well respected, in the Scottish Premiership. So you'd fancy that someone else in the SPL would take a shot on him.
Yeah. Celtic goalkeeper slot domestically is unchallenged. Joe Hart's not going to get challenged by Siegrist or Bain. But I think if you're just dipping your toe into Sorare, I would be very careful about Joe Hart's position in the team after this summer, because I think, as we all know, Postecoglu is quite ruthless, and I think he ruthlessly wants to keep scaling this team up for Champions League. And I think we're going to need a more press-resistant goalkeeper. A goalkeeper with a better idea how to play out from the back, and maybe that goalkeeper might come from Japan. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't see anything. I mean, like Joe Hart is clearly not at the level to play Celtic style. I just don't think he's at that level. technically. I think there's a reason, particularly why when he was at Man City, Pep got rid of him straight away, because he just recognised he couldn't play that way. And by the way, I've got 2 Joe Hart cards. So I'm saying that from a position where I do have Joe Hart. However, being honest and from a Celtic perspective, I don't think he's good enough for Celtic. And the goalkeepers that have been linked with Celtic, I think, are a better fit.
But Mark makes a really good point there, because there's 2 things going on. You're talking about this, the SO5, which is the scoring system for Sorare. Joe Hart is perfect for it, because the next game against Ross County, there's a 57% chance of a clean sheet, which is really, really high in a game of football. I think the average is like 33%. Most goalkeepers have a clean sheet 1 time every 3 games. Hart's obviously above that, because he has playing for such an overpowered team. Quinny, you mentioned at the start, Celtic are one of the best teams in the Sorare stratosphere. They really are. And if you can... So Joe Hart still has a lot of utility right now. He's not challenged by Siegrist or Bain. He's going to start every game from now until the end of the season. But I don't know, what's your opinion, Quinny? Do you think Celtic need to change that position? Do you think there's going to be an upgrade, or do you think he has 1 more season as being the number 1 at Celtic?
Well, I think Joe Hart's definitely got another season in him in this Celtic side, because of what he doesn't... Well, what's not in the numbers with Joe Hart, is a very difficult thing to replace. Like McBride, who I'll definitely come into this in a second, is like, and anyone that kind of follows football to any level knows, like, getting a bad, and we all know Celtic fans firsthand, like, a bad goalkeeper is worse than a hole in the head. So it's definitely a position of be careful what you wish for.
Yeah,
I think it's an interesting one. Like, firstly, I think he's on quite a good wage. So, like, if you're gonna, we've got a lot of guys where we move them on, and maybe they want to move, they want to further themselves and things. But Hart's got a contract for next year, so what do? Do you have a guy sitting on the bench earning £15,000-20,000 a week? Kane's a free, so I'm pretty sure he is on a really good wage. We did have some big goalkeeper problems before he came, and I think he's a good influence in the dressing room as well. So you've got to weigh all those things up. Like, he's had a few issues, and I don't think he makes enough saves as well. I know it's a stupid thing to say, because obviously he's not getting barrage of shots, but sometimes, like, you see that goal and it's from outside the box thing, you think, oh, you should be saving that. But I don't think we've got a goalkeeping problem just now. I just think we're kind of aspiring to play better out from the back, and we'll come to the centre backs and things. So if there's somebody there we can buy that improves that, then that's good. But it's going to cost you a good bit of money to get somebody that's a good shot stopper and good on the ball. There's not many of them about in world football. So if you find one in Japan, or you find one somewhere else, that's fine. And I think Siegrist, actually, I think he's all right. I mean, obviously he's not displaced Hart, but I think if Hart get injured, I'd be quite confident he can come in and do a job. He's done quite well in the cup games and stuff he's played, so I don't think he's a big problem. And then obviously Barkas will be out on loan as well. What happens there? He was a disaster at Celtic, but he is a guy who's more comfortable on the ball, and I don't own any, so he'll probably be the number 1 next year.
much more comfortable in the ball, and much better at claiming crosses, and having an absolutely phenomenal season. Utrecht.
I've watched a bunch of Utrecht games, and pound for pound, infinitely better than Joe Hart. See, the thing is like, I mean, like, see, when it's like soft skills that you can't really touch, like influence in a dressing room and stuff like that. I mean, those are things that I think are oversold in football. Whilst I agree, by the way, that I think Joe Hart, in the 2 seasons that he's been at Celtic, has been a really positive influence on the team, and I think he's been helpful to Ange. I think if you could have turned up on day 1 to Ange and say, look, it's your decision, who's the keeper going to be? It wouldn't have been Joe Hart. I'm very certain of that, because Ange is not stupid. He would have seen Joe Hart play before. He would have known his absolute noticeable weaknesses on the ball. But I think a lot of Celtic's culture of, recruitment has been well documented about, players coming from nowhere without the manager's influence and such like. And I think that 2 years into Ange's his time at Celtic now, I think Ange will be feeling a lot more confident to say and present the players and the sort of deals that he actually does want. And what I think is going to happen is this. I think Ange doesn't long term want Joe Hart, and maybe not even for next season. But I think, like both of you guys say, and for the reasons that McBride specifically says is the wage and the fact that he's got a contract for next season, I think he will be the goalie for the whole of next season. So I don't think there will be any great worry for any holders for next season. But I think Celtic will recruit in Japan for a goalkeeper at the end of the J-League season, and he will arrive at the same time as when our normal Japanese recruits arrive, just in time for the new year. And I predict the keeper that we sign will start the following season. I think he'll be benched for the first few months, and then Joe Hart
Games and
will
such.
eventually be out. In terms of Barkas, from what I've heard, Barkas is already been lined up to. There's already serious interest from bigger clubs. Utrecht themselves have already said that they can't afford to keep a hold of Barkas, so I think there's bigger interest in him.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd agree with that, to be honest, yeah.
One of the biggest parts about building the team, goalkeeper, so important, right? You need the goalkeeper to do something. Ideally, a clean sheet. Joe Hart is, as we've all kind of laid out there, ever present for Celtic, is basically going to be there for, I think we could probably agree, the rest of the calendar year is what we would probably all expect him to play for the most part, even if a replacement was signed in the summer, but he is a bit of an all or nothing card. If he doesn't get the clean sheet, he's not doing much in the game, as you guys are saying, so he doesn't really collect many points for us. And equally, when he does get the clean sheet, because he's not had that many points to accrue elsewhere, he's not really punching big numbers. So overall, given his age and some other stuff, he's maybe not an amazing goalkeeper. But the Celtic defence has some of the best picks around in the world. And I think we'll probably start with the talismanic defender we've got at the back in terms of just profiling what you guys think of him and all the rest of it, of course. The one, the only, Cameron Carter-Vickers, of course.
I thought you were going to say Starfelt there. That would have been class. The big man's point. Superb play.
Yeah, I think he's improved a lot. Actually, when he first came in at Celtic Park, I thought he was making a lot of mistakes. And I think in the European games, particularly last season, he stood out really, really bad. I remember the game against Leverkusen, got absolutely annihilated. I'm not saying that he's going to dominate European games from now on, but you can see his stature has grown, his confidence has grown. In the Scottish games in particular, I mean, he costs the games. I mean, he really could get the pipe and slippers out.
Yeah, he's under so little pressure. I mean, his dueling is up at like 70%. So he has such a positive point score on Sorare just from the fact that he's winning a majority of his duels, like a significant majority of his duels. A lost duel in Sorare is horrific for a defender. So 70%, that's like Van Dijk in the Premier League. But Sorare's relative to the league you're playing in, so you're going to get the same score. It doesn't matter if Van Dijk's playing in the Premier League or Carter-Vickers playing in the SPFL. It doesn't matter. You get the same score at the end of it. So it makes great sense to get a Carter-Vickers card in Sorare because he's playing weaker opposition. He's absolutely smashing any striker he comes up against. He's a really good player. I was unsure of the price tag when Celtic signed him. I thought we could have got better. Maybe a centre-back in the mould of Ayer, more like a libero that's marching forward and whatever. But do you know what? He's actually played really, really well. Carter-Vickers, 69% of his duels won. You can't argue with that in Sorare. And also, he doesn't make a lot of stupid fouls, Carter-Vickers. Because a foul in Sorare is a duel lost and a further deduction of points on a foul. He only makes like 0.8 fouls a game or something like that. It's very smart player, does not do stupid fouls, doesn't get booked often, and 12 clean sheets or something this season in the league out of whatever many games. You can't really find that in Sorare. You really can't find that across the world in Sorare. Celtic are a bit unique in that sense. So, although I'd say I prefer maybe a different type of defender if we're going to hit the heights in Europe, can't argue with Carter Vickers domestically.
36 accurate opposition half passes as well per game. You
Yeah.
know, and obviously in Sorare you get the reward for a final third pass from a defender. So that number is really high, particularly for a central defender. I mean, he's getting 95.7 touches a game in general. So,
Yep.
you know,
3.7 progressive runs per 90 as well, which is pretty good. So he's pushing up the pitch. And yeah, if defenders make final third passes, it's quite a decent boost. I'm not sure, Quinny or McBride, if you know, but I'm pretty sure a defender making a final third pass is a pretty decent boost in points, which is just all about getting those points.
It's like 0.3 a point per pass or something, or 0.25.
Yeah, so 10 of them, back them up, you know.
It's a few points, and they all add up.
Definitely.
The other thing I was going to say as well is, obviously Celtic play a lot of games, and you get the rotation and stuff coming in. But you know that if Vickers and Starfelt and Hart and some of the other guys will come back to midfield are fit, then they're going to start. And like, when you look at the fullbacks, sometimes they're putting up really good scores as well, but that's a position where they're getting up and down the pitch all the time, and there's more rotation in the fullbacks. Whereas, you know, Vickers a few games where he said they pulled up sore or whatever, he missed it unexpectedly. But lo and behold, like they play like they're pretty reliable in terms of selection when they're fit as well. So you know you can sort of build a team around that, because the worst thing you can get in SO5 is a brilliant player, but they're only playing 55% of matches or whatever. Totally. That's just going to kill you in DNPs. So that's why when I was buying the sort of super rares and stuff, like that was just kind of the obvious pick. Like, you know, I was spending a lot on somebody that you just can't select. You know, so yeah, I mean, scores are really well. Scores really well as well. So, what do you think, Quinny?
Yeah, I think he's amazing. I've just had a lot of his stats on screen as you guys have been talking. He's got an L5 of 72. So the Sorare scoring matrix is 0 to 100. And, you know, it's all about positive actions. The more of them you can capture, the better. And obviously negative actions will take points away from us. And the scores I had up on screen, guys, if you actually were to look, if you look at his L5 is 72, right? But if you look at so that's his last 5 average games, score of 0 to 100. The average is 72 out of 100. But if you look at the last 7 games, if you look from after his DNP against St Mirren, he's got some huge scores, and all the statistics that he's capturing huge points for is everything you're talking about. Accurate final third passes, huge duel success, and he's an absolute monster. And when the maximum score is 100, to have a centre back that's not scoring goals or getting assists or anything crazy like that, getting you 75, 85, 92 points on it.
Nuts.
Is incredible.
And
they're fighting with clean sheets in those games, you know.
Mad.
92 against Hibs without the clean sheet.
It's just unheard of in Sorare, really. I mean, and again, Sorare is relative to the opposition you're playing in, the league you're playing in. But at the end of the day, it doesn't discriminate against that, because you can enter that Celtic team into the All-Star, you can enter it in the Challenger Europe, the cap system, whatever you want to do. You can enter that in, and their score against St Johnston at home is going to be the same score that Skriniar gets Inter Milan away to, you know, Real Madrid in the Champions League. It's going to be the same score. Sorare isn't that sophisticated in terms of how it groups the leagues and splits them up and separates them. So there's still so much opportunity for getting players like those guys. And the guy next to him, Quinny, doesn't do too badly either.
Yeah. Well, Big Starfelt, he's not been quite as ever present for injury and the odd bit of rotation or whatever as well. So I think, like, in terms of centre backs score all, you know, when you're looking at centre backs on this game, like, you're looking for the sort of stuff we spoke about: accurate final third passes, good duel success, tackle and can intercept, these kind of things. The other 2 or 3 centre backs we have as the other option to go alongside Carter Vickers is Starfelt, Kobayashi, and Welsh, which are all kind of in that chain of who plays with Vickers going forward. At the moment, it's very much Starfelt.
Yeah. And again, if you look at him on Sorare, he's the top SO5 average player at Celtic, I think, for the last 15 or last 40. I mean, the perception of Starfelt in the actual team when you're watching the games, he's clearly error prone. He's clearly uncomfortable with the ball at his feet. He's clearly awkward with his body position at some points. But if you're looking for someone just to get those Sorare points, he's just unbelievable at getting points. He just doesn't lose duels. He's the same as Carter Vickers. It's like 70% of his duels are won. He's only 2 yellow cards this season, 0.7 fouls a game, so he's barely fit. I think he gets fouled as much as he fouls. For a centre-back, that's obviously quite strange. And yeah, he's getting those. I've got this, Quinny, this is interesting. I'm pretty sure he's one of the highest, he's pretty much the second highest progressive passer, or the highest progressive passer in the whole of Scotland. So Celtic are quite asymmetric, aren't they? They're quite left dominant. I don't know if that's actually accurate or it's just my perception, but they are quite left-hand side dominant. So Starfelt, Taylor, Maeda seem to get a lot of the ball, and that's something else to think about. We'll get there later. But yeah, Starfelt, much the same as Carter Vickers, just a complete rarity in the Sorare stratosphere.
I think he's been a bit more like positive on the ball and stuff. Like I get the point about like everybody thinks he's got a wee bit of an error in him or he's gave away a few penalties and stuff. But even you think back to a non-SO5 game, like the goal we scored against Rangers at Hampton, he's come out and he's won the ball and he's like coming forward. So I think maybe last season actually Vickers was averaging higher than Starfelt, and I think the difference now is that Starfelt is playing more positively, and that type of thing does make a difference because you're getting interceptions, you're getting duels won, and I think him and Vickers when they're playing together are really quite tough pair to play against. Like, you know, they're both quite strong. You don't, you know, earlier on the season we lost 2-0 at St Mirren, and I think it was like Stephen Welsh and Gents that played at centre half, and we get beat 2-0. And every time the ball came into the box, you thought somebody was going to get out muscled, but that doesn't happen with Vickers and Starfelt. They can both handle themselves and the strength side of things as well. So but they're pretty tough, and that all translates quite well too. Because if you've got a guy who's a good centre half, is good on the ball, but losing loads of duels, then that's going to screw their score as well.
Yeah, and Starfelt it does step out a lot more and does those interceptions. I think they're like cheap interceptions where the defender goes round the side of the striker and steals the ball. That counts as an interception. It's like 3 points. Starfelt does that, I think, a considerable amount more than Carter Vickers.
I think my
game
issue
against Hibs here, and I think I heard this on the Sorare Odyssey podcast themselves, but despite getting a negative decisive action, so Starfelt is credited with conceding the penalty against Hibs, so that brings his base score, basically decisive score, down to 15. But despite that huge handicap, he still brings in 68 points. He rocked out 53 points on his actions in the actual match, and that's 2 tackles, 0 interceptions. But maybe what you're sometimes you need to worry with these Opta, how it gets captured, because he's down for 10 duels won, but no interceptions. So maybe a couple of those duels could have been an interception in another day.
Yeah, there's like ambiguity. Is it a tackle, is it an interception, and then they just end up giving like possession one. You know, like, well, or like there's sometimes you see like vital clearances, and you think, well, that should be a big thing, and it's just like nothing because it wasn't a distinct action. So that's frustrating, but that's a whole other podcast, Quinny.
And a nice little detail I'll just add in. Sorry, Mark. I'll just add this in so I can come away from Starfelt's score from that game. But another thing it ties into your final third passing from earlier. He completed 3 passes that were so final thirdy. Somebody got a shot away, and all 3 of those passes then get credited as an attempted assist. Which are 3 points a hit. So he's picked up 9 points for attempted assists, which normally people get for taking corners and stuff. You know. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I think the thing with Starfelt is that he, you know, whilst he is good at all of those things, the one thing in particular that I'm critical of him is his general passing, and I'm not meaning anything adventurous. I'm meaning a 10-yard pass to a teammate that he can get wrong. When you're doing that against Ross County or Hibs or St Mirren or whatever, when you're in an overpowered scenario, can be great. But if you go back and look at some of the games, even in the Champions League, and you look at the Leipzig games, and you get a timely reminder of what standard Carter Vickers and Starfelt really are at the moment. I think Ange is not lost on that. I think Carter Vickers is nailed on. I think Ange will keep him. I can't see any scenario there where he doesn't keep and build the team defensively around Carter Vickers. But I think Starfelt would be a player that Ange would try to move on, and maybe even in the summer.
Well, the other player that's kind of knocking around in the squad as well is Yuki Kobayashi, who we've seen start to get bled into the team now. I think when you see Kobayashi play, you can see, like we're talking about, the symmetry of the squad. When you see a left footer on that side of the pitch, playing with the better players in the squad, building the attacks up on that side of the pitch where we're overloading, it's just so much. It just seems so much slicker, so much easier. And those hazard balls from Starfelt kind of happen because he's right-footed, and he's trying to do something awkwardly, and it doesn't come off.
Red Bull Salzburg under Jesse Marsch had a way of playing which was, instead of switching the ball in the air, it's better to play 2 passes along the ground. And it's the same with a left-footed centre-back. You save time by him naturally opening out his body that way. It might only be a split second or whatever, but you save time and you can just more fluidly move the ball about. On our podcast, the Sorare Odyssey, I'm always talking about this infamous study that was done about the positive effects of having a left-footed centre-back, and I can't find it anymore. It's out there somewhere. It was related to Pep Guardiola in some way. But if anyone ever finds that, please send it to me. But basically, just having a left-footed centre-back has such a positive effect just on the flow of the game and saving time. It might seem like a tiny thing, like just that little bit of not having to mess around. But you see with Starfelt, he brings it in and he just looks awkward. And it's okay against Ross County. It's okay against St Johnston. But if Leipzig are hounding you, or Real Madrid, or any number of top European clubs, that 0.3 seconds of him positioning his body properly is just gold dust. We need to take that off. And I think Yuki Kobayashi could be the replacement for Starfelt, but would probably need to become more dominant at dueling and become more like Starfelt and Carter Vickers in that sense. But he's got plenty of time to do that.
Fully agreed.
Yeah, I think he's not played that much so far. In a few of the games he's played, he's kind of strolled them, but he's not really been put under pressure yet. So I want to see how he reacts when he's playing a game where he is put under pressure, like one of those games at St Mirren away, or even a game at Tynecastle or whatever, where playing against Shankland or somebody like that, because that's where I remember Big Julian always fell down. He was a good player before his injury, but then there's certain guys like Lyndon Dykes just gave him an absolute roasting every time we went to Livingston, and invariably we dropped points there as well.
We got Shane Duffy in to sort it all
out. He was a success, wasn't he? I think Celtic are quite solid at the back. Obviously, Kobayashi does seem to be quite good on the ball, but he's come in from Japan and he's probably not had those sort of physical challenges. As you say, like obviously he's young and he's got time to develop that side of the game a bit more as well. But Starfelt and Vickers, they are like you feel as if Scottish teams maybe want to throw that challenge up where they go a bit more direct, or they've got a big target man or whatever, they can look after that challenge. Whereas Kobayashi, I don't think he's actually been really tested from that point of view in terms of the games he's played so far.
Not to contradict your point there, but I think it would be interesting for maybe folk that don't watch Japanese football to know that the J-League's had a culture of bringing in big centre forwards from Brazil and from across the world. So a lot of these Japanese centre backs actually do have a far more robust experience of having to deal with physically bigger European players that have came over because they're trying to exploit that in Japan. Korea, it's even worse. I mean, some of the guys in Korea, you guys will have seen it, that big Milic guy, and just They just
Like Kurt Silva.
6'7". Boris Tashi was over there playing.
Yeah.
But in Japan, these guys, have had to come up against, really physical target men, out and out target men strikers. So that is a positive about the J League, is that they've definitely had an experience of that. It is more technical, definitely, for sure. Far less physical, far less smashing around. I mean, the Premier League in Scotland, the Premiership, is just one of the most high-octane, high-impact leagues in the world. But these Japanese players that come over, like Tomoki Iwata, for example, is one of the most combative, smashing into people left, right, and centre, intercepting, getting involved in duels. He's really, really physical. So it's a real, it's a plus getting these players in from Japan, because it's certainly part of their experience over there.
Yeah, but he's not really played many games even for Vissel though, has he? Like it was kind of first choice. Kikuchi was injured, wasn't he? So, like, I suppose he's got reasonable experience, but probably not played as many games as like Hatate or guys like that had played before it came to us. I think he's still a bit raw, but there's a good thing about that as well, where you can kind of bring them through the way you want to play as well, which is interesting. And just gives you that option having the left-footed centre back as well.
Yeah.
For sure. I think, so there's a pretty established centre-back pairing for the moment, at least anyway, of Starfelt, Vickers. Stephen Welsh comes into the conversation for rotation now and again, but he's probably not got much of a career,
Last resort.
Tomoki Iwata would play before Welsh now at centre-back as well.
So
Tomoki Iwata, a lot of his time at Yokohama was a ball-playing centre-back that was kind of like a wee Otamendi or what's that other wee guy, Fernandinho. He kind of played like in that role, so Welsh is probably going to have to move on it, I think.
Mascherano, there's a good one.
Mascherano.
But for the fullbacks, again, I think for right back, we're probably not quite in that position yet. We're probably but for left back, I think we're very much in a situation of Greg Taylor being number one, very established, very key to the actual way the team plays on the pitch, with Bernabei being very firmly an understudy. Alistair, Johnston and Ralston, but for my money, I think that's a weekly fight, almost, that I think Johnston's coming out the better for the now, but I don't think in terms of fullbacks, like, they score very differently on Sorare because they do give away possession a lot more because they are generally involved in creative play a little bit more. They do cross and this kind of thing. So the play that you've got with the fullbacks is you need ones that get 90 minutes. You need ones that are more successful than unsuccessful in what they do. But on top of all of that, of course, if they can get into the box and get decisive actions, goals, assists, that kind of thing, then they can be huge, huge players in Sorare fantasy football. For the fullbacks, guys, how do you read the situation?
I like Greg Taylor and what he's done and how successful he's been at Celtic under Postecoglu and really maximising his potential as a player. I worry for him in terms of how mobile he is and how physical he is in Europe in that context. But domestically, and most importantly in this Sorare context, he is, a great player to have because he makes lots of final third passes, lots of progressive passes. He's not great in the duel. I don't even know what his dueling percentage is, but certainly not really strong point. But in terms of passing, playing that inverted fullback role, I think Greg Taylor, you've got to hats off to him. He's absolutely maximising his potential under Postecoglu.
He's improved a lot as well, hasn't he? He's really like one of the most improved players at Celtic, I would have said.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the thing with Greg Taylor as well this year is that a lot of his final third actions are resulting in decisives, where there was a lot of the focus in his play was just about the negatives of him making mistakes last season. I think he's developed as a player. He looks fitter. I think Greg Taylor's probably one of the first names in the team sheet. I think Bernabei has done well in the odd glimmer of time that he's been given in the team, but he looks still a wee bit off it in terms of his performance. I agree with you about Ralston and Johnston. I personally think it is a 50-50. I don't think Ange does. I don't think Ange likes Ralston. I think Ange will play Johnston. For Sorare managers, I think Johnston is a better option, purely because of his presence in the final third.
Yeah, and also physically, Johnston can protect you in transition a lot better than Ralston can, because he's just bigger, stronger, quicker, just a better option at the moment. So I'm really need to get one of those Alistair Johnston cards, but unfortunately I'm not as wealthy as some of the oligarchs in this room, so I'll have to just work up to that.
Go that far.
His form since he's been at Celtic has been incredible. Probably one of his worst performances SO5 wise was probably one of his most famous games, which was against Rangers in the 2 weeks draw. But he's got amazing statistics on Sorare. He's very much became the number one right back since his arrival. It's a wee bit of buyers beware on this because of the way Montreal played in a kind of 3-4-3 shape. A lot of his cards are midfielders also, and the midfielder cards don't score the same as defenders because the different positions of the pitch collect points in a different way, you know. So
Yeah.
the fullback cards we can see at Celtic are very 90 plus 100 capable. But when you compare them to the centre-back scores we've had on screen, you'll see that fullbacks, because they do lose possession more, etc., they do have more of those 30s, those 20s, because the goals conceded hurt them just as much as the centre-backs. But in terms of the points that they hemorrhage, it's just a little bit tougher. It's surprising to hear you say, for me, Mark, that you don't think Ange rates Ralston, because I actually kind of think the contrary.
Just going, I mean, well, here's the facts. He's brought in 2 players since, you know, he's arrived in that position. He's put them straight into the team. I mean, I think the big test was when Ralston was fit and Johnston was there. I think that was the first real test of who Ange favoured out of the 2 of them, and he went for Johnston, which I think was the main test. I think the last game at Celtic Park that Ralston started, I think he scored pretty well actually, but on the night he was just an absolute mistake monster.
Yeah.
I just think that there's a negativity around Johnston a bit. It's not Johnston, sorry, around Ralston, a bit similar to Greg Taylor last season, where it just seems to be error prone, and the crowd get on his back instantly. I don't see him. I mean, I think if Ralston gets a game, gets a start between now and the end of the season in a meaningful game, I would be shocked.
Yeah, I think if they're both fit, sometimes it's a bit hard because Ralston's been injured, and then again, I think he's left the Scotland camp as well. So, like, for that point of view, like, I think we're pretty certain that Johnston will start at the weekend as well. I think just the way Celtic play, obviously, there's going to be an element of rotation in those positions because just the actual effort and what the fullbacks are asked to do is part of the game. You know, 1 minute you'll see the ball being played and they're in the final third. So they're doing a lot of running, and I think Ange is one for managing minutes. But we're past that spell now. Like, we've only really got maybe the odd midweek game now. You're talking about 4 games and then the split. The semi-final of the Cup's on a weekend as well. So I think we're kind of past that point where you're playing in Europe. Juranovic played in Europe. Ralston played all the weekend games. So there was a sort of pattern developed then at that point before Johnston was here. Whereas Mark says, I think Johnston will probably just play at the end of the season. And Bernabei, I mean, Taylor's really established himself in that position. I think, like, Bernabei, I think will be good, but you can see that he likes the bomb forward. I don't think he's got the same positional sense as Taylor. I just think as a back 4 works a lot better when you've got Johnston and Taylor in there. So if I was to pick, that's what I would pick. But I think there'll be some games where Ange will just do some managing minutes, but should be okay at the end of the season. I think it'll be pretty solid to the end of the season now with the schedule we've got.
Yeah, copy and paste that backline and goalkeeper, I think, for the remainder of the season is probably what's going to happen. Maybe the odd wee bit of minute relief. I think guys like Bernabei and Yuki are probably still going to get some minutes come this season, but I think it will be maybe the league matches that are, I don't know, just a wee bit more affordable for that kind of thing now at this stage.
We can be one soon, Quinny. Come on, be one.
Yeah,
We're going
no, that's what I mean. You know, like, you know, it won't be like against anyway. Yeah, we'll see how it pans out. For me, like, I really enjoy, like, part of the, I don't know if I was going to say enjoy or not, right? But in general football, yeah, definitely enjoy. General football, when I'm watching it at the game, on the TV, whatever, midfield is always where my attention is drawn to. And it's always the players I'm looking at to see who's actually influencing the game, who's making things happen. And all across, like, the 8, 9, 10 midfielders Celtic have got on their books, we've got so many different options, so many different profiles. But it does seem to be that they can all be interchanged into the system. The system doesn't really change too much for the most part. With the rotation that we do see in midfield, you know, for me, I think Callum McGregor is the easiest pick every week. He's maybe not get the biggest high scores because he doesn't get as many goals and assists and whatever. Probably closely followed by Hatate. But then when you look at Mooy, O'Reilly, Iwata, if we bring him into this conversation as a midfielder, Turnbull, Forrest and Haksabanovic, it's very much, there's a lot of different moving pieces going on there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that McGregor's probably the easiest one. I think Ange very seldom takes McGregor off, never mind, doesn't start him. So I think he's probably the one guy who will be 90 minutes every game. I think Hatate's our best player, plain and simple. And in fact, I think he's been our best player for some time. But I think you can see now with shit.
I've got on screen the now just while we're getting Mark Patrick Rare's power sorted. So Hatate, again, a wee bit of buyer beware. He's got cards in 3 different positions. Obviously, we all know him as a midfielder, and the midfield scores are on screen now. Pretty decent, mainly crap, okay?
Yeah.
But he does have defender cards, and because he is so final third present, it can be active then to the clean sheet bonus if we get the clean sheet bonus over the line. His defender card is disgustingly good. He's almost got an L5 there at one point of like 98 or something, you know.
The defender card is definitely, when you're at home to someone like St Johnston, I'm picking on St Johnston tonight, they seem to be the team of choice, but you want to be picking a Hatate defender card because you get that boost of the clean sheet. Those final third passes, it's just, that Hatate defender card, honestly, is just one of my favourite things to select. When the game weeks are coming, I'm just like, oh, brilliant. But you know, Mitoma's the same for Brighton, another Japanese player. He has a forward card from his time at Kawasaki, and then when he was on loan to the USG, he has a forward card that's so much better than the midfield card because he is just an out-and-out decisive scorer. So it happens in Sorare, doesn't it, where you get these weird little quirks with the positions, and Hatate's defender card, I would say, is probably the best you can get.
He was playing left back for Frontale for a while. He was sort of covering that position, and he ended up with quite a lot of cards minted. And then, but he's actually got a forward card as well. I've actually got.
He's got a forward. I've got his rare forward card,
cool.
Which is great as well because he's always in the hunt for a decisive. You know. Yeah. Especially at home, especially against weak opposition.
I think and Celtic
and Celtic's, entire methodology of how they approach these games, it's that 2-3-5. It's the Pep Guardiola Man City, even though he's changed that. He's gone for something different now. It's a 2-3-5, your 2-8s, your O'Reilly, your Mooy, your Hatate. They just the rotations that they have, they're moving around, they're trying to create space. A nightmare to deal with. The best example of that was against that 3-0 against Rangers. Hatate scored 2. It's a great example of how devastating that system can be when you rotate to the level that Celtic were doing the rotations on the pitch between the inverted fullback, Hatate, even the way that the wingers would stay wide and then they'd come inside, and it was just amazing. So Celtic are a joy to watch at times when people are on song like that. And I think what Mark said before he was banished and cut off, and I'm sure he'll be back at any moment. Hatate is probably Celtic's all-round best player. But it's interesting when you look at some of the data sheets and stuff that you can buy. He's nowhere near any of the top of the list. He's one of those players that he's just a bit magic. Don't know, there's something about him that's just hard to kind of pin down. Why is he so good? What is it? Just the way he plays, the way he moves, is his movement? Obviously, lots of data is not movement tracked. It's all events based. It's a tackle, an interception, a pass. The way Hatate moves around a pitch is just phenomenal. He's just an absolutely majestic player, and I would say probably need to just keep recruiting at that standard all over the pitch. Hatate should be the gold standard. Can we get a Hatate level of player all over the pitch, and we'd be winning the Champions League, I suppose.
His composure in areas, his composure in areas and tight areas, particular, and big matches, but in any match really, but in the big matches is where it makes a difference. If you look at the games against Rangers, I mean, he dominates the match against Rangers pretty much regularly because he'll take the ball in areas that other players won't, and he'll just drive into space. As you say, Sean, absolutely. I think it's something you and I have spoken about a lot before. Is there's lots of times where Hatate ends up with a 25, and it's so rare. You're ripping your hair out, going, "What's happening here?" He's just had a blinder. But a lot of the positive things that he does and the amazing, wonderful, skillful things he does don't have a name or a score. So he ends up not getting the big fancy scores that in a game where people would probably unanimously say Starfelt has played poor and Hatate's had a blinder, could both be given the opposite scores. But yeah, I think that I think we'll struggle to keep Hatate past the summer. I know there's already some big clubs looking at him, big, massive clubs looking at him. I think a bid will come in that will be way too much for Celtic to turn down, and I'd be surprised if he's still at Celtic next season.
Yeah, and that's a good thing, and Celtic should let him go and get as much money as they possibly can for him and just keep progressing and use that money to go and get the next Hatate and just keeps levelling up and just do it for as long as possible. And Celtic have a tendency to hold players for too long, past their peak value, then sell them for a cut price deal. Then there's unrest in the club because you've got Ayer and Edward who clearly wanted to leave and were promised that they would leave a long time before they actually were allowed to leave. So sell Hatate at the highest possible value you can get for him. Let him go on, show other players that we produce this opportunity for you to come here, play for 2 seasons at the highest level as you can, then you move on and you go to play for a big club. Don't sell him to Crystal Palace or something like that. Sell him to a top team, you know.
Totally.
This Virgil van Dijk having to go and do a 2-year addition for the big clubs at Southampton. What a waste. He was ready to go from Celtic straight into one of the elite clubs. Love to see Hatate doing the same. No messing around. From Celtic to another overpowered club. It needs to happen for the sake of his career. I think he's too good to waste any time.
So this kind of touches on the 2 spots we've spoke about already, McGregor and Hatate, right? But let's say Hatate does go. Behind them at the moment in the pecking order in the squad, we have Iwata and Turnbull. That either one of them come into the picture in that event.
Iwata's a number 6. He's not an 8, so they're never going to, unless you change to the double pivot system, the 4-2-3-1. Or the 3-4-3 or something like that, or move McGregor. But again, McGregor's getting on. Do we want him pushed right up the pitch? Maybe domestically it's good, but then we've got to think about Europe. And obviously McGregor is a number 8 in Europe, box to box midfield. I don't know if it's feasible anymore. As much as I'm at McGregor,
I agree. I don't think he can play as that player anymore. I think that the greatest McGregor that we ever seen comfortably could dominate in that position, but I don't think he's got that. I mean, in Scotland, it's a different thing. If he could play that role with a blindfold on,
he could go in the wing in Scotland and score. Honestly, he could play off the left like he used to and be an absolute demon for Celtic at the 29, whatever it is. Honestly, there's sometimes I'm like, why don't you just stick him up there again for a laugh? Let's just see what he can do.
To take your point with the other 2 players, I think Iwata will play next season. I think he'll get far more time next season, and he will be just a straight up defensive midfielder unless Ange sees something in him that will allow him to play centre back, which I doubt. Turnbull's done. I know that fans love these judging a player by the the big stunning goals and stuff like that. He's done at Celtic. He doesn't fit Celtic. Ange doesn't rate him. He's not going to be there, I don't think, past the summer. I think he's a good player for a mid-table, bottom table English team where you're, where that type of goal is heralded as, wow, that's insane, where he can do that. Like Rogic, where, unpopular opinion, but I don't think he progressed Celtic well at all. And a lot of our fan base thought Rogic was the greatest thing ever. Where is he now? He can't get near that West Brom team because he's not good enough. And he was never... he had some great moments at Celtic, but he was never anything phenomenal at Celtic, in my opinion. And I think that Turnbull is like a poorer version of Rogic. So I think he'll get moved on. And I think, and by the way, just because the standards are higher at Celtic, which is why Rogic was moved on, because Ange demands more. And I think Ange will want to replace, assuming Hatate does leave, that is, Ange will want to replace him with real quality, and probably go back to the well of the J League, where there is no, there is no shortage of real talented attacking midfielders. One that Sean's a huge fan of at the Antlers, Higuchi. You could go to some. There's a whole raft of players in there that could come in and do a good job. I'm pretty sure Ange is fully aware of all of them. But yeah, that's kind of roughly where I would see the backup players going.
What about Matt O'Reilly? What do you think about Matt?
I like O'Reilly. I think O'Reilly's good. And probably a wee bit like whereas I think Turnbull's done, and I really emphatically do believe that, and I think I'll be proven to be right in that. I think O'Reilly needs more time because he actually has great talent. I mean, he is super talent. I think he needs to settle more into his role in the team and have more of an impact, a bit like what he had, earlier on in the season where he was just on fire. But you don't get a day off with Celtic. You need to be on that every single game, which was, why Mooy came in and ran away with that position. Surprised everyone, myself included. Actually, I thought that was just going to be O'Reilly starting for the whole season. But I think O'Reilly's going to turn into a top player. By the way, like a real top player. I think he just needs time. I think that's all it is. It's just time, and he'll learn from those players, and he'll develop, and he'll get better. I hope he will be a really big Celtic player.
Yeah, he's the second highest smart passer per 90.
Love smart passes.
Which is passes that are creative and penetrative that attempt to break the opposition's defensive lines. Who's above him? Who's number one in the league? Quiz time.
Hatate.
What?
For smart passes.
Taylor.
No. It is.
In the league?
In the league. No, it's a Celtic player though, because obviously.
All right. Is this like...
Lower volume of games, it's Haksabanovic. He's got 2.2 a game. So he's constantly trying to make these creative passes. But Matt O'Reilly, I think, actually has had a bit of a raw deal in terms of the sentiment towards him this season. I think maybe a lack of goals and assists has led to this kind of wrong perception of his actual season. His underlying numbers have been fine. He's just not had those moments. And Mark, you mentioned Rogic. Rogic always had these moments that would bail him out. But if you really strip back some of Rogic's actual performance data, it wasn't great. It was laboured, and he wasn't helping the overall team. Like AZ Alkmaar away so many times in Europe, you're just like, why is this guy on the pitch? But O'Reilly definitely suffered a wee bit this season because he's not been as bad as some people have made him out. And I actually hope he can get a wee run. If Hatate is going to be injured, hopefully O'Reilly can get a run and get some goals and assists and please everybody in that way, because genuinely don't think he's had a bad season at all.
He was moved back to like cover for Callum as well. So when McGregor was injured, he went back and he played that role, and I thought he'd done pretty well in there, to be honest. But it's not really a role where you're going to be expecting him to do, have a lot of goals or assists, because he's playing a bit deeper, and I think he's kind of he's a confidence player as well. Like, I think
he's a corner taker, and that's massive in Sorare because you get so many key passes and just cheap points from just whipping crosses in. Doesn't matter if it's a terrible header on goal, it's a key pass, couple of points, boom. I don't actually know how he does in Sorare. Is he a good Sorare scorer?
O'Reilly's been really good. If you look at his scores this season, he's only got 1 goal and like 5 or 6 assists. But his SO5 scores have still been very good. He's not getting many minutes, like you're saying. But for only having 1 goal, for a guy that got I think about half a dozen in his opening spell, he's definitely got much more to go. He's still got a 100 in his bag from this season as well. And yeah, I think he's a great card. But I'm surprised, I do think Aaron Mooy is surprised how much he's pushed O'Reilly for that spot and how good he's been when he's had his time on the pitch.
Look, I'll hold my hands up. I was appalled when Celtic signed Aaron Mooy. I just thought, what's happening here? This is James McCarthy stuff again. He's clearly immobile. He's clearly not going to be able to actually fulfill what we need to fulfill at the Champions League level. See, in fairness to the guy, he actually deserves so much credit because I don't know how he does that with the body that he currently has. I mean, it's remarkable, how even that goal that he assisted at Ibrox. I've watched that so many times. I was like, that was a moment. I was like, do you know what? Everything I've said about this guy, I've got all my purest ideas of how Celtic should play and how we should optimise the system to an extreme degree. That moment he had in that game where he just assisted that goal, I was like, nah, this guy, fair play to this guy, because he's not working with a great physical condition, and he just shields the ball and manages to just not lose the ball and just cover for the fact that he's not, physically that gifted. And I wish he would never do those interviews post-match, though. That is genuinely quite horrible to endure. But yeah, apologies to Aaron Mooy.
I think I was the same as Sean, by the way. I actually thought it was a huge downgrade for us, and again, I was wrong. I think that one I didn't see coming. I think the thing his decision making, but in those really key areas, outside the box and 18 yard, the amount of times he just slips the little pass that no one else is seeing, he's phenomenal. Actually, I think he's really given life to us in so many games, and he's scored some brilliant goals. I know he's had a lot of penalties in there as well, but that goal he scored away, the one where he just chipped it over the keeper, absolute class. I think his physical condition, like Sean says again, is a big question mark for next season. Could he go next season? You would have to imagine that he will be there and in the running for a starting place still next season. I'd like to see him really work on his physical condition, because I think he could be really, really useful, because he still is only, 32?
Yeah.
So
but I think, like Rogic, I think he's just maybe not, just not been gifted the best condition, and he's making the most of it. I think because there's some players that are just physically so naturally fit and strong and athletic, and I think maybe the lack of that has made him into such a good technical player, because he's had to work with that and maximise it. And yeah, he's been so impressive, honestly, Mark. So impressive.
Do you know the thing I like as well? Not to turn this into the whole David Turnbull bashing, right? But just a simple differentiation here is that see when Mooy gets the ball, he's constantly looking for a better option. Hatate gets the ball, Maeda gets the ball, McGregor gets the ball. O'Reilly gets the ball. They're always looking for a better option. That's why I just don't think guys like Turnbull get the ball and they're just like, how is this too far to shoot? And it's like, nah, I'm sorry, it's a team game. And you're surrounded with real talent who are, the whole point here is to get the ball in that net. I don't want to go on about the XG and stuff like that, but the XG probability of some of the decision making that Turnbull is making is just horrific. I think those guys are definitely there because they do make better decisions.
I think you could make a case that Turnbull is actually one of the players that still has that the aura of the Neil Lennon days still with his play, a bit like Ryan Christie's decision making. Lee Griffiths was one of them. I think Turnbull's still got the Neil Lennon days of horrific decision making in attacking areas at times, and it's not going. It's not moving away. See, if you watch those Japanese players, they just don't have it in them. You've got Jota, you've got Turnbull, you've got these guys who make silly decisions. They shoot from distance. They've got this trait where they make bad decisions. Hatate, Maeda, they always head up, pass. I think Turnbull just struggling to really get rid of that. And that was obviously horrific, the Neil Lennon stuff. Everyone in the team was at it. And he just still comes... I mean, by the way, if you look at his actual performances, they're still pretty good. I mean, he's still 0.3 expected assists a game. So he's every time he goes on the pitch, he is creating chances. But is that just a product of playing for such a great structure?
It is. Totally.
Because he's a good player. He's got good movement. See what he does really nicely, and I can't really describe it. But he does this turn where he uses the outside of his right foot, and he does this really nice turn. And he has got a good composure in the ball, and he's got something about him that I just think he's probably maybe cognitively needs more work. I don't know. There's tons of stuff out there. Red Bull Salzburg and all those guys use these brain training devices. There's something that missing, but I don't think it would take that much to really get a much better player out of David Turnbull. I think he just needs a wee tweak in how he approaches games. I don't think he's a lost cause. Maybe at Celtic, yes. But he certainly could be turned into a phenomenal player if someone just gets a grip of him.
Yeah,
I think the standard's been clearly lifted to play in the midfield. I was at the Hibs game, and when O'Reilly and Turnbull are on the pitch together, Turnbull, every time I've seen him come on, like you say, he's got the stats there. He does influence the match when he gets his minutes, but every time I've seen him, he's definitely the odd one out in the system. He doesn't replace the position on the park or make the runs of the guy he's subbed on for. Very often he's on kind of doing the Turnbull role, whatever that is. Whereas the other guys, like O'Reilly and Mooy, I've kind of paired in this video when we've been chatting about it, because they two kind of jostle for the same spot and they're kind of lifting the bar on each other, I think. Mooy's probably reached an amazing level that most people didn't expect, and O'Reilly's probably got a big part to play in that. And O'Reilly's outlook on he's not had that great a season is probably part of the reason, is because he's compared against Mooy. Whereas Turnbull, when you compare him against anyone, it is kind of like you say, it is just kind of like loose in the team. He's not coming in and just fitting in.
Yeah, there's just something that doesn't quite work. But someday will make a player out of him. Someone will make a really top player out of him. But again, just sometimes you just need that coach that just gets that out of you. It's happened so many times where players are just wrong place, wrong time, and I think he might be one of them. But he's still a good player to have around, and he's Scottish as well. And so you get that whatever when you're registering players, a homegrown thing and all that stuff. So, but yeah, I've got faith that one day he'll fulfill his potential, hopefully, but probably not at Celtic. Because I agree with Mark Patrick Rare on that.
And then I think the final part of the pitch to come to is where the money is made. The goals are won. The goals are scored. The games are won. Is the forward positions. Now we've got 6 or 7 players, again, depending on how you want to categorise them. Forrest and Haksabanovic, technically midfielders, in the substitute wing positions, as it were. But we've also got the likes of Abada. We've got Jota. We've got Furuhashi. We've got Daizen Maeda, and recent acquisition Kyogo as well. So plenty of attacking options all across the pitch. And as we mentioned earlier, Hatate has a forward card if you did want to think of him in this equation somehow. But plenty of choices. Again, the game's all about with the forward cards, as you guys will know, scoring goals. So we're after guys that can score goals, make assists. But ultimately, like we spoke about with a lot of the other positions, there is successful actions that these forwards make that we're looking for. Who's better at doing these things? Like Jota, very creative, takes on people on the dribble, gets into the box and looks to play passes that we're looking to tap in and stuff, so creates a lot of assists. But there's other players in the team that do other things, like Maeda wins a lot of duels, for example, and whatever. So when it comes to the forwards, how do you kind of see it?
I think, like, for example, I mean, the striker's Kyogo. I don't think there's any discussion there. I know that I've saved some tweets of some Celtic fans at the start of the season making some mental points about Kyogo, and I said that this is going to be crazy for you to look at the end of the season. The guy's going to be the top scorer. He's absolutely the best striker at Celtic. He's going to go down as a club legend. He's just insanely talented. Some of the goals, I mean, two seasons in a row in a cup final, he's scored 2 goals. The guy's just wonderful, and he's got an insatiable passion and just likability. I think the thing is that always a better foil as a sub coming on, in my opinion, because I think GG, again, Celtic fans thought, and genuinely Celtic fans were saying that GG was better than Kyogo, which I think is absurd. GG is a good player, definitely. However, there was far too much of a why is GG not playing stuff. I think the balance at the moment with O is good because O's got to come on and really knock his pan in for that time. I think he's more of a team player. So I think that dynamic is better for Celtic at the moment. Whereas fans getting on Kyogo's back every 2 minutes, it's just like this is our best striker. The wide areas, I would say Maeda on the left. Again, hate to say I told you so, but Sean and I, right from the very word go when Maeda came, we were saying this guy's going to change the club, and he has. He's comfortably made that position his own. Even at this start of the season, fans on his back. Some fans were doing the get him out of Celtic Park stuff. I was, again, saved the tweets. Crazy behaviour, crazy views that you would want to get a guy with that insane drive and just natural fitness and pressing ability, and just by his off the ball work creates so much space, but just relief for the midfield, but also for the other forward players. Plus just makes incredible runs, and is so unselfish in possession, gets the ball, isn't trying to run 30-40 yards like Jota just to try and have a shot. He's trying to look for a pass that is in the best position. Gets a lot of big chances missed, but let's be honest, he's getting a lot of big chances missed because he's getting on the end of chances that realistically has no right to be getting on the end of because he's so fast. He ends up touching the ball in the 6-yard box and it gets classed as a big chance miss.
Yeah.
I think Jota I thought Jota last season was arguably our best player. I would say probably Jota, Kyogo, McGregor. But this season, Jota's been down the pecking order, in my opinion. Just hasn't had that solid impact in the team. Now, his scores probably haven't went down as much, purely because, you'll still get a million shots a game and he'll still dribble past guys a million times a game and, all the stuff. But apart from I think he got 100 in the game against Hib.
100, wow.
His performances, in my opinion, haven't been to that standard. I think it's better having him on the right and it's better having him crossing low. This one where he cuts in on the left and then does swings it in with his right foot cross. I'd like to see the stats on that because I don't think many goals have came from that. I think lots of his crossing have been speculative. On the right, where he can actually be encouraged to beat his man and get the crosses in low, I think we've had more joy out of him, and I think he's far more useful to the team. I think Abada's improved an incredible amount this season, but apparently he's leaving. There's huge influence, huge interest in Abada. Forrest I love, but he's not going to get game time at Celtic, in my opinion. And Haksabanovic, I'm not a fan.
Shock.
You're on your own.
Yeah,
Dumbfounded.
Yeah, I mean,
No, I'm not. I think the thing is Haksabanovic is a great talent, but again, in terms of like let's talk at the start. Haksabanovic is not an Ange player again, and probably wasn't signed by Ange because he has none of the attributes that an Ange player has, which like it just hang on to the ball every single time he gets it, and try and shoot. Like there's not
he's definitely distinctively different from what you would say as a kind of a Ange system player. But he's very useful if you're playing a stubborn, low block at home. Haksabanovic is really useful because he does score some, that's that cutting inside and shooting, curling at back post. So he is useful for that. But then you have to ask the question, well, what are we building here? Are we building for like playing a certain way every single game and focusing on maximising that with these front pressing Maedas and selfless players? Or are we going to kind of maybe not go full pelt on that and then bring in like more Haksabanovic type players, more Jota type players that are actually more entertaining in a way, like I think, Mark, what we need to do is probably temper our extremity for loving these players because that is like a choice. Like I genuinely love watching Maeda, but when you go to games, you can tell some people just don't really appreciate that. They want the guy cutting inside and curling it in top corner because it's just a more impressive moment, I suppose. But there's something about Maeda that's just special. I mean, the fact he can do what he does and cover. I mean, remember he played against Simakan Leipzig game, and he basically went toe to toe.
Maeda was a right back that night.
He went toe to toe with one of the most physically impressive players you'll ever likely see, like a basketball player, and he just stifled him. That is priceless in Europe. And so I agree with Mark. There was definitely not that long ago, maybe in December, where Kyogo was getting slagged, Maeda was getting slagged. Thankfully, people have came to their senses. I think those guys have to be the standard of what Celtic recruit for, or the standard of how Celtic recruit. I mean, they're so selfless. They fit Ange's system perfectly. Maybe we can have a Haksabanovic here or there. I'm not against that. But imagine we just had more of those types of Maeda players all over the pitch, just killing teams in Europe. Just Real Madrid would not want to play against a team of Daizen Maedas.
Do you know?
Assuming the quality of each player has the same, skills for each position. 11 Daizen Maedas might be a problem actually. Not sure he's a good centre back.
Yeah, he might not be good in centre back. But just to qualify my point on that, with this, which is that, see, when you're playing in those matches where Haksabanovic and I don't know, let's say Abada or Turnbull, there's another blast from the recent past, they come on and they score their magical, wonderful goals. But they're scoring their magical, wonderful goals in the last 30 minutes of the game, where Maeda and Hatate and Kyogo and
they've unlocked the door.
They've unlocked that. They've worked it. They've grinded the other team down, ready for them just to come on and finish it off. And I think a lot of people pine for that, but they don't really factor that major part in, which is that Maeda will have worked that fullback in defence absolutely inside out. Now, just because he didn't get, the digit to show that, in terms of his score, whether it be in people's minds or in Sorare, I just think coming on in those. I mean, sometimes Sean and I talk about this, like where it's maybe better for a Maeda to come on as a sub, because then he can just be the constant fans' favourite all the time.
He can have the last 30 minutes to
and everyone's memory is just great.
Game state is such an important thing in football as well. It's massive. I mean, it informs so much of how a team plays. But Celtic are quite unique in the fact that they don't actually stop if they're 3-0 up. They will go for 4, 5, 6. So actually, the players that come on for the last 25 minutes are still going to have to play at the intensity the game started at. But I think sometimes, as Mark's saying, people should be a little bit more mindful that the Hatates and the Maedas and the McGregors and, you know, the Greg Taylors, whatever, they've smashed that door down. And then the entertainers can come on at the end. And also, fans just want to be entertained. Some fans don't want to dive into football as deeply as all of us four do and look at stats and have Sorare teams. And sometimes people just want someone to come on who's maybe, on the whole, not that useful long-term for the club, but just entertain them. Do a Rabona, whatever, rainbow flick over the head, volley, top corner. Sometimes that's what the shared memories that folk want to have, and, you know, why not? But when it comes to Sorare and stuff, you start focusing your view definitely on being a little bit more efficient with, right, what do you like, what do you not like? And certainly I've just got such a kind of passion for those kind of Maeda type forwards. Kyogo Furuhashi is exactly the same. Barely touches the ball in a game, but always gets on the end of something. And that's something that you've got to say Kyogo has done really well in being that type of striker for Ange, where you don't touch the ball, stay away from the ball, stay in those zones, always be ready to get in behind. And I think O has struggled with that a little bit, coming into the channels, doing what he was doing in Korea. But you're seeing with each game, each 20 minutes he gets, he's staying central. He's staying on the shoulder of the defender. And he's just going to get better and better. Physically, he's in amazing condition. I think he'll be a great successor to Kyogo if Kyogo did move on. Celtic is just looking so good going forward. I mean, it's just it's a no-brainer. Just try to manage rotation if you're looking at it from a Sorare perspective. But even, like Mark said, 30 minutes into the game, it's not a disaster if the guy doesn't start. Because that 30 minutes is just sometimes an absolute... It's obscene. It's obscene what Celtic do to some teams in the last 20 minutes, you know, and that's down to Postecoglu and his philosophy of never stopping. And it sounded like a little fancy little soundbite at the start, but if you watch Celtic week in, week out, they literally never actually stop. It is quite brutal what they put certain teams through.
Yeah, I mean, I think Haksabanovic is an impact player coming off the bench is brilliant. If that's the plan, then I'm on board. Haksabanovic for a starter for us is a problem, in my opinion, because he just doesn't fit our system.
Is he maybe, but the real fit? But because if you listen to Haksabanovic, he says, I'm an attacking mid. And then if you look at the Montenegro national team, he's played centre mid 2 games in a row.
Maybe that's where
get hooked off at halftime.
Still, but that's his position. Maybe that's where you get him.
A good number. I'd like to see Jota play centrally sometimes. I'd like to see Celtic be a bit more flexible. I don't think we can just play this 2-3-5 forever. Ultimately, you'll need to change it. You'll need a little bit of flexibility, particularly if we're going to come up against teams with better resources, better brains in Europe, better, players in the pitch. So definitely to be flexible with our systems and think, well, maybe he could play there, Quinny. Haksabanovic, maybe that is the better position for him. But Celtic with so many options. I mean, it's just absurd. And it's one of my favourite Celtic teams I can really remember in terms of tuning in and watching. It really is just a joy to watch. It's just great. And owning in them Sorare, it's even better because you win rewards and prizes. And you get a deeper understanding and appreciation for how good certain players are, for sure. I'm sure you guys have experienced the same thing. You just go from being a fan of Celtic to then being a fan of the players and understanding how good they are because you're tracking events and things within the scores. So yeah,
Sweating the lineup.
and the lineup thing, and that's another thing you mentioned at the start, McBride, about guys just starting. Such a big thing, especially when you just join Sorare. Just getting people to start games is the be all and end all. Just give yourself a chance, and you know Kyogo's going to start. Mark Patrick Rare, you mentioned that the Giakoumakis Kyogo thing. I don't think that was healthy, because actually Kyogo was utterly number one standout, striker, number one driver. And then you had this guy who there was a perception that he was at the same level and that he should be above Kyogo. Now we have like an F1 team. They've got the number one driver and the absolute number two driver in O.
Yeah, totally.
It's better dynamic, because O, like you say, is going to burst a gut when he gets on that pitch, 25, 20 minutes. And again, you can select O in your team and know that he was going to get on the pitch and he's going to get that last 20 minutes. And you could argue that getting 20 minutes at the end of a game at home against my favourite minnow, St Johnston, is better than, let's say, a striker playing 90 minutes for Motherwell.
Sean,
it could potentially be more probability.
There's a game, right? So there's a game, and this is just to highlight a point, and I'm sure fans will remember this game was the game at home to St Johnston, and I didn't just pick them. It was the game, it was the 4-1 game, Christmas Eve. And there was something really interesting about this game. If you want to go back and watch it, you'll see. After about the 63rd minute, because we lined up with Forest and Maeda, and we're 4-0 up, 63rd minute, he takes off Forest, brings on Abada, Jota. He takes off Forest, Maeda and O'Reilly. He brings on Abada, Jota, Haksabanovic, and then 68th minute brings off Kyogo and puts on GG, right? Final score from 4-0 with those guys coming on, 4-1, right? I remember, and if you go back and you look at it, look at Ange.
That's the Hatate right back game.
He was raging that game. He was raging.
And I think that was a light bulb moment from Ange, which is that he realised Ange was never a big fan of GG. Clearly, he didn't sign him. Obviously, fans never wanted to believe that, but that was the absolute truth. You could see that. GG just didn't have the touch and the work rate that was required, in my opinion, and I think Ange knew that. But if you look at that game, the reason I think Ange was raging was because he basically ended the game with 3 greedies on. So you've got Abada, Jota, and Haksabanovic, which are all ultimately 3 greedies. They just want to go and run themselves and score themselves. And by the way, 1 on a pitch, I think, is good for the team. I think it's a good balance to have 1 on the pitch. 2 is a problem. 3 is a nightmare. And 3, we played with nightmare mode in that last 30 minutes of that game, and you've seen exactly what that does to your team. Ange went mental. 2, I think, so that's, you're basically asking for 1 on the left and 1 on the right, I think is a big problem for us, because there's not the balance. So I think if you have, and by the way, I don't include Forrest as a greedy. I think he's a passer. He'll just get to the byline and try and pass it. He'll try and look for the option to pass. So I think the best flow for our team is to have 1 of them players starting. I think when you start 2 of them is when you start to have problems, not just for the balance of the wide areas, but they just don't release the ball for Kyogo, who's ultimately the guy we want to score the goals. So yeah, but that game was like, I think that was a proper aha moment for Ange. Not that he absolutely needed it, but if you watch him in that game, he is raging, and he knows that he can't rely on having, his unselfish players out of that front line.
Yeah, I think if one of the guys goes, it'll probably be Abada, to be honest. I like him, but I feel as if he's one of these guys where he comes on and he runs into the defender, and you get the ball next time, you think, right, just take a touch and play it back, and he just runs into the defender again. And so he's a bit raw. The talk of him going to the EPL, I'm sure he would do okay in the EPL, but
I think he would. I mean, is it Southampton? What Southampton just love Celtic, don't they? What sign everybody at Celtic?
Yeah. Okay. It's just he's not a great jeweler, is he? He's but off the ball he's very good. Gets into great positions. It always pops up with goals because his positioning in the box is just great. He's just always at the right place, right time. But very hard to quantify that with any data other than just it being a very obvious trait that he has. But I would worry for Abada in the EPL. I really would, because I don't know, they're just not very good at giving people chances, are they? And on the ball, Abada isn't great. It does lose the ball very often. His dueling's poor, as I mentioned. His dribble success isn't great either. I think he would struggle unless he was in a team that really understood how to utilise him, because off the ball, he's good. He's probably going to end up being a really good striker, Abada.
I would worry if he went to the Premier League, he'd end up a bit like Mudryk, because Abada's very good he's very good on the front foot and when you're on the back foot. But if play's stagnant and it's building up and it's shuffling left to right and doing all that kind of stuff, then he's not the same player. You know, he wants to be running and you're backpedaling, and then he can twist and turn and get into the box and shoot or pass or something, you know.
But you know what, Quinny? It's another positive. Celtic have got another guy that there's interest from the Premier League in signing him for more than you bought him for. So another guy, it's another good opportunity. Same with Starfelt, same with all these guys. If we sign them for a couple of million, we can sell them for 10, 15, and you're not crippling your squad. There's a couple of players that I think it's unimaginable that Celtic could lose and remain the same team. Hatate is one of them. So we did a huge fee. But back in August or whatever, I was getting assaulted on Twitter by all the usual suspects coming after, all the guys with podcasts and little group chats, because I suggested we sell Juranovic and Giakoumakis for what would be perceived to be peak value, because it's the summer, the Champions League coming up. Do we really need to see both of them in the Champions League? Because the reality of that situation might not be that great. The idea of it might sell them on for more. Buy the rumour, sell the news. And what we've all seen is that both have been sold for a decent price, but maybe not the highest price we could have got. But ultimately, it's a positive that we're able to sell these guys on and get good money for them, and it doesn't affect the team. At the time, people were offended because I said selling Juranovic and Giakoumakis isn't really going to lead to, they're replaceable players essentially. Abada is a replaceable player for sure. We can get someone of similar quality in for, similar fee that we brought him in for, and just keep that going, because that is the main source of revenue for Celtic. Clearly, is going to be player trading, arbitrage. McBride, you're back in the room again. Hey. You were saying about Abada. Finish your thought. Abada, you were mentioning he was linked with down south, I think, or something.
Went to like Salzburg or Leverkusen or somebody like that. Whether or not he's ready at this stage for the EPL, I don't know. If you think of Edouard, obviously, Edouard was really good for France under 21s. He was really good for us, and he just become a bit of a nobody really in the EPL. So, obviously, we'll see what happens. But I think if there's going to be a candidate for somebody who'll be moved on for a price, Abada would be a good one. He's got a good goals per game ratio. He's a forward. A lot of teams look out for somebody like that, and I think we'll get a good fee for him. And if I'm honest, I don't think we'll miss him that much, because at the moment, if you picked a team, you wouldn't pick him in the starting team. He's been really, really good coming on, but I think he's one of those you've got to turn over, take a profit, and you buy somebody else and you move on.
Yeah, when you were in cyber purgatory, that's exactly what I said. He's replaceable. He's a replaceable player, and take your money and run and get 2 or 3 guys in that can hopefully do the same thing, and just keep that going. Just keep that going for as long as you can, and hopefully Japan don't get on top of their silly contract situation.
I think that's the thing here is what's not. I mean, I remember two years ago, whatever it was, we were talking about Peter Lawwell's just general approach to Celtic and business, and there is no coincidence at this moment in time that all of these deals that Ange is doing for Celtic have fully gained the trust of the Celtic board, from my understanding. And amongst the fact that we're having pretty good success on the field and the product's good, the fans are happy, those transfers now are absolutely ideal for Lowell, because they can get that money out of that club in a super quick, better than before, purely because they're taking players, as Sean's just touched on there, from the J League, exploiting that really loose contract situation that I know they're starting to deal with it better in Japan now.
Some multi-year deal contracts getting handed out Japan, so it's time sensitive. I think that won't be happening for much longer.
Yeah,
raid in Japan.
But I think like Celtic have exploited that, and I think they will milk that for the foreseeable future. And by the way, it's the same situation pretty much in Korea as well, which allowed us to get and almost Cho as well. I don't think Cho is entirely dead. I actually think that might still happen. But there's just going to be, can we just rinse and repeat here? Rinse and repeat. I think I heard 10 million being quoted for Abada. I would take that money in a heartbeat if that was genuine amount of money for Abada. I think he's a great young talent, but I think that is crazy money for him. What did we pay for Abada?
It was 2 or 3 million, I think. I don't think it was a lot. Don't think it was into the 4s or 5s or anything, but I think it was a reasonable fee, maybe 1.5 plus add-on, something like that. Let's see if we can try.
I mean, at that, if we could recover double that money, 6 million plus, I would say that's a good deal. If it's the Premier League, then fling on the Premier League tax onto that, give us the 10.
It's a shame we couldn't get Oscar Glauch. I don't know how you say it. Like the young Israeli. If ever there was a time for Dudu Dahan to step up that scout and get us, it should have been him. But sadly, he's went to Red Bull Salzburg. He's massively rated.
4 million euros for Abada.
4 million euros.
It's a lot.
Wow, was it?
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's. See, when you think about it like that, I mean,
wasn't it a great risk
lot,
reward?
innit?
Was it?
For-
Yeah.
I'm not selling it for 10 then, are we?
20.
That's
We want 20.
treble, isn't it?
If we want 20 then.
180. And by the way, an interesting thing as well I read recently, and this is the kind of ruthless, extreme philosophies that other clubs in Europe are having. There was a sporting director recently came out saying that basically the club isn't looking at anyone over the age of 19. So 16 to 19 is the only age bracket they're looking at to maximise this player trading thing, because that's how they can make their money. And they're
Basel, they've went full football manager mode.
can't-
There's like signed like 8 players and like they were all under 20. Like it was mad.
So Celtic got a good thing going with the Japanese exploiting that contract situation, but probably time we get a more robust idea of like how we're going to filter players to play Ange ball, because I don't think we can get away with too many, deviating from the old lists of players. Like Haksabanovic 100% came from an old scouting list, basically. There was a few of them, and that's fine, and he's a good player. And again, it's like, it's just not my... Just don't think we're going to reach the levels in Europe we need to reach with too many players like him. But for Sorare, like 30 minutes at the end of a game for Haksabanovic compared to 90 minutes of, I don't know, Ross County striker, I'd rather 30 minutes of Haksabanovic at the end of a game for sure. Because he's definitely going to shoot, because he is like Jota, very greedy. But yeah.
I think that's the thing. See with Celtic players in Sorare, like coming off the bench, I mean, you're talking what, Turnbull, Haksabanovic, Abada, typically. All 4 of them potentially can score.
O'Reilly or Mooy.
Yeah, okay, 5. So there's your 5, right? All 5 of them
Score or assist.
potentially
That's
score
them. Boom, 60 points.
as they come on. Like, I mean, in fact, you would expect 2 of the 5 of them to get decisives every game. That would just be the expectation. So, I think, even being a sub for Celtic coming on is far more powerful than being a starter for a lot of other teams for 90 minutes.
Big time.
Sorare wise, that is.
Yeah. I think that the problem this season's been like Benfica, like obviously they've got guys who are like you were talking earlier about Vickers and Sean, like the base points are putting up. They've got guys like Otamendi who are putting up big scores. So you've got to kind of look at what you're playing against as well. And then interestingly, recently, was playing in Challenger and everybody put their Benfica stacks into All-Star and everything because it's better prizes. So you've also got to look at stuff like that. But I think like Celtic-wise, as long as you don't concede 1 or 2 or whatever, then the most powerful is going to be like Vickers and Starfelt, and then amongst the forwards, love Furuhashi, but he throws in a lot of 30s and stuff, and you're not going to really win divisions with 30s. So it's interesting, and that's why Jota's probably been so valuable, because Jota has a kind of average game and he's doing like 52, 53, whereas Furuhashi is an average game, he's doing 30, and you can maybe still get a podium with 53, but with 30 you're dead. So
he's a decisive player, isn't he, Furuhashi? And Jota is going to get a bigger all-round score, and you're totally right. Like, if you're thinking purely Sorare, like, it's a different ball game from just your enjoyment of watching football or being a fan of Celtic. When it comes to, right, how am I going to win in Sorare? Yeah, some of these strikers that are just so decisive based, like, it's hard to kind of match them up against some of their other forward cards, like completely different. Jota's a winger, Furuhashi's just a through the middle striker. But yeah, that's a really good point actually to think about. Like, Jota's AA is going to be much more powerful all-round score, by the way, for no one knows what AA means, but it's all-round scoring. So there, Jota's going to get a much higher all-round score game week to game week, whereas Furuhashi, you're just praying gets multiple assists and goals. And that's just the calculated way you need to look at playing Sorare. It's just, if you want
Jota's
to win,
average AA in the last year is 15, and Kyogo's over the last year, its average AA is 1.
So there you go. So Jota is objectively a better forward card than Kyogo's, probably. I don't know if the assists and goals save Kyogo. Does it push him back up, or because Jota must score and assist a lot as well?
Yeah.
27 decisives for Kyogo over the same time period, 25 for Jota.
So Jota's just a better Sorare card. Yeah. And that's the brutal truth of it. But Kyogo's still a very good player. If you can get Kyogo, you're definitely solid week in, week out.
Oh, as I mentioned, it could be worse. You could have spent £40,000 in David Turnbull's unique.
Who did that?
Fantasy teller. Yeah, because remember when Celtic came on, like, he scores.
Yes.
He was banging before he was injured. He was banging in 100s, but I remember it really well because I think he was banging in those scores at a point where we hadn't signed Hatate. Hadn't signed these guys, so this was pre.
I think you're right. Yeah,
coming to the club, and he was doing great scores, and they went bonkers for him. 40, I think it was 40 or 50,000 for the unique.
It's mental, but that is the opportunity that Celtic also afford when you're thinking about, right, so we've went through the whole team and we've got the goalkeeper, could change, we've got the left-sided centre-back, could change, a couple of midfielders could easily change, a couple of the wingers could change in the striker. That's where the maximum opportunity is. It's who's going to come to Celtic and make them a better team.
Yeah.
Is it going to be Japanese players again? It's going to be Koreans. Are they going to dip into the South American market? There's a huge opportunity for the next guy who's going to come in and play week in, week out on the wing for Celtic, because they're not, you can guarantee wherever they've came from before, they're not going to be anywhere near as valuable as they will be starting every week for Celtic. So Tomoki Iwata right now is really cheap on the site. If Celtic change their system and there's 2 holding midfielders instead of 1, Tomoki Iwata's value just goes through the roof again, because playing in that position week in, week out for Celtic is just absolute gold dust. So that's where Celtic probably presents the most opportunity right now, is who's going to be the next starters nailed on. We've obviously speculated who's going to drop out maybe in future. So we'll need to get our scouting teams out, guys, and figure out who's the next starting 11, who's the next key players for Celtic. But
that's it.
Yeah.
We'll be coming back from this one, guys, after the Ross County game. So we'll be coming back to have a look at the teams we played out, what we thought about the match, and all that other good stuff, you know. We've been going for a fair bit. If anyone's still a lunatic and still listening to us after we've been going for this long, God bless your soul and thanks very much. But guys, coming into the Ross County game, like, I'm quite excited for the game. I think we should probably do quite well. I'm not so confident on a clean sheet. There's a few injury worries. Just to wrap the show up, is there anything you want to throw out for the weekend in terms of early thoughts or predictions and whatnots?
I think it'd be interesting to see if, in terms of the injuries, because I know we spoke very briefly about potential injury. Well, Hatate, I don't know Hatate came off. From what I was led to believe, that was 2-3 weeks injury for Hatate. I don't know is he.
I've not heard anything, to be honest.
We probably won't hear anything from Celtic when it comes to injuries.
Until 3:05 on Friday. And Ange will go, he's not playing, mate.
And that's something I don't think is acceptable anymore, like in this day and age. Like they should be disclosing injuries. You know, I don't know what advantage you gain by not disclosing to the fans the injuries of your players in a more clinical way, like they do in the MLS, like they do in Bundesliga, the Japanese league. Yokohama just put up, Yuta Koike has tendonitis in this area. He will be out for 6 weeks. Like, let us know, so we can get an idea. But Celtic still have that kind of like weird thing where, remember they were doing that thing with the lineups under Lennon? Lennon said, I don't want to put the lineup out in the right order in case the team knew the formation. And you're just like, guys, we're so far past that. We're so more. The opposition is much more sophisticated than that. So yeah, that would be great if Celtic could just be more open with our injuries, just so we know is Hatate going to be playing or not, and we don't know 5 minutes past 3 when the deadline hits. And
because the reason I'm saying that is that apparently it's a hamstring. So if it's a hamstring, that's not just a straight back into the team. That's why because at first I thought it was a hamstring, and I was just checking again there, and that people seem to think it is a hamstring. So if it is a hamstring, I think he would be a doubt for the game.
Yeah.
And then it would be Mooy, Riley, McGregor midfield, Jota, Maeda.
Is Mooy
Kyogo
fit as well?
Yeah, Mooy's okay.
Yeah, his was a minor.
He probably could have made the squad as a push, and he was being cautious. So I think that he's pretty much fit to play.
So you're probably looking at in-goals Hart, Hart, Taylor, Starfelt, Vickers, Johnston, McGregor, O'Reilly, Mooy, Jota, Maeda, and Kyogo.
Again, with Maeda, though, he's come back for the Japanese squad and said to work on his fitness. So I don't know what that means. It's just friendlies they're playing now, though, isn't it? So maybe you just try to make sure he is actually fit for the weekend. So
he didn't play.
Yeah, he didn't play, no. But Celtic have got like an 80% win chance. They're 57% chance of a clean sheet. 3 goals scored for Celtic is 59% likely. So, I mean, you've just got to kind of keep vigilant on anything that comes out of the club, which is very limited. But just stay vigilant and see if you can get any rumours or murmurs about who's fit and who's not. Because I hate that stadium though, Ross County away. I hate the angle of the camera is very low. It's hard to kind of enjoy that game. The distances, judging the depth perception is just so difficult when the camera's that low. St Mirren's ground's the same, just not a great watch. But I'd reckon, about 2-0 maybe? I would say the defender cards and Joe Hart are probably the best selections for that. I think Celtic get out of there unscathed.
Yeah. I mean, Ross County have only what they've got. Brophy obviously has been on a wee bit of form for them, but he's going to be coming up against Carter Vickers, who I think will just body him in that match, to be honest. I think it'll 3-0. I can't. It's going to need to be, as you'd said earlier on, McBride, sort of lapse in concentration from Hart, or a defensive error that would allow them to get a goal. I can't see them, getting any kind of play to score.
And Ross County have an XG of 0.94. Celtic have an expected goals against of 0.87. So this is like dreamland, clean sheet probability, predictability stuff. So my approach is probably Celtic's defenders. I'm less convinced going forward because I just hate that stadium and I don't think I want to watch that game knowing I need goals and assists from certain players when you I just don't like that stadium. I just don't like the experience of watching Ross County away games. So I'll probably put the defenders in, Celtic defenders, and maybe stick some overpowered strikers and forwards and other favourable fixtures. So I probably won't be as deep in it as you other guys who I'm sure you have full stacks out for this fixture.
They've only won one game in 5, Ross County, as well, so they're actually pretty poor form. The home one was 4-0 against Dundee United as well, who have been pretty rancid, so they're not in good form either. I think there was once a time where you got there and you think that's a tough away trip and stuff, but I was quite impressed how Celtic dealt with even going to Tynecastle and winning in the cup. And it was a non-SO5 game, but I thought we were really good that day, so I think even if it is a tougher game, I think we can handle that as well. But I think you're right. I think you look at recently conceded against Hibs, kind of maybe questionable penalty and stuff like that. Like I think pretty good chance of a clean sheet there.
Yeah, but then you also got to think, like you were saying earlier on, McBride, like thinking about trying to win at Sorare, and like so you can get that Salzburg are playing away to Klagenfurt, and you've got to be looking at that and going, right, I probably like to split mine up and go half Salzburg, half Celtic, just because I don't want to ruin my experience of that Celtic game when I've got a wee inkling that it might not be a floodgates opening game. Whereas Celtic at home to Ross County, I'd be all over a full Celtic demolition. But I don't know. It's the same with that St Mirren game, Mark. A couple of weeks ago, I remember saying the same to you. I just felt a wee bit, don't know, just had this feeling that it wasn't going to be the demolition that I hoped it would be. And I can't even remember how that
day, didn't we? So.
No, we did.
But
it was so. But it was so. It was an unhelpful 5, McBride. It was no.
Greg Taylor giving
and it was late in the game. It was like
penalty.
4 goals, 20 minutes to go or something. That went up to that point. There was no. Yeah, I'm sure you guys maybe had a better luck that day.
But I think that's the thing. Like like in that, because I think that was my first game where I had to put in Carter Vickers and I think it was just Carter Vickers at that time. And then I had Taylor in my team as well, and obviously Taylor gives away the penalty.
Sorry, Mark, just before. So in that game, just to make the point that this happens a lot in Sorare to maybe people who don't play it or casual players, I had Hatate, Maeda, and Furuhashi in that game that Celtic won 5-1, and all 3 of those players did like awful scores because the floodgates opened after they'd battered the St Mirren door for about 70 minutes. And I'm suffering, and I'm also like, that is so frustrating. Like, my guys have just knocked their pan in to put this door down, and then all these other players that other people own are just coming on and just cleaning up, and I'm just watching the game. I'm happy Celtic are winning 5-1, but yeah, it would have been nice if my players had been doing it. And yeah, I suppose you have to just go with your inner.
So even on top of that as well, like your defensive guys are killed straight away. Joe Hart instantly loses his clean sheet. Greg Taylor's ends up with an absolute
penalty
terrible score because of the penalties to the, it's just a mess in terms of your SO5 teams. Just my one last point on that is, see Joe Hart going for penalties, like he just jumps out the way. What's going on there? Like he's not. I mean, I get it that there's a fair chance that he's going to concede at a penalty, but
there's about a 77% chance
to try and save it. He's literally jumping out of the way.
I think it's just one of those things that some keepers get a real just tidy run, and others just like Craig Gordon had a ridiculously bad record with penalties at Celtic, didn't he? But I don't think he's a particularly bad penalty kick saver. I think it just happens. Yeah.
I think with a lot of penalties against us as well, like there were quite a lot of soft
yeah.
ones. Like when VAR came out, and like they were really uber soft penalties as well. And I know he's not saved any of them, but we did have quite a bad kind of.
But remember, like Boric being in goals for a penalty, you're just like, this is getting saved. There's something about Boric, you're like, this is getting saved.
See, the thing is, right? Like, see when it's like, look, the game against Hibs and the game against St Mirren, we both early on in the first half we're conceding penalties, right? And it's the penalty for the first goal. So basically, that's and I think under this Ange team, obviously we don't stop, so we're going to come back into the game. But still, to concede the first goal in a game could go the other way. And I think that in those situations, I'd like to see my goalkeeper on the line, actually, ready for it. Hart is diving to the right-hand side. He's actually on what would be just as well turning round. It's not how I'd like to see my keeper lining up for a penalty.
Yeah.
He's just getting on a bit now, Joe. Like, is that a goal? I can't remember who we were playing against. I think it was in a wee game, and the guy bashed it, and he did hit the ball quite hard, but he didn't really move his feet, and he kind of got a hand on it, and it still went in. And you're like, for that distance, really, you should be saving it. I can't remember who we're playing against, but I don't think he's that mobile these days. If you know what I mean, like
St Johnston. That was the
guy. Yeah, that's right.
The guy. Was it Dale? Was it that something Dre? Right.
Yeah, and it was kind of his as well. It's like, all right, like but it was kind of his side, and he just never really moved quickly enough for it. And our problem is, like, he does nothing for like 30-40 minutes at a time. So we'd expect him to come in and start making wonder saves, and he's done nothing. He's like, he's not moving. He's just kind of passing the ball 5 yards, and all of a sudden he's getting into action. So I think it takes a different type of concentration to be a goalkeeper for Celtic or Rangers sometimes.
Definitely. And then just
any action at all.
The sentiment with Barkas, because Barkas just wasn't making any saves at all, because he was getting one shot into his goal per game, and the poor guy, every shot that went in, every shot that he faced was a goal. I mean, there was a game against Milan away that the finishing from Milan was just utterly absurd. It was like that Jens Hogg guy scored one of the greatest goals just from nothing. And you just think his luck's not going for him. Then he goes to Utrecht, faces lots of shots, has lots of opportunity, and all of a sudden the perception is he's a good goalkeeper again. It's tough to be a goalkeeper, and it's probably better for another day. But definitely, I was saying to Mark off air a couple of days ago about it's probably not great to go clean sheet hunting, purely clean sheet hunting, because those keepers generally can't really get a score once they've conceded. Once Joe Hart concedes, that's that done, because he's not going to make any saves later in the game.
Yeah,
pretty much. He's
All Blacks like that as well.
All Black, yep.
All Blacks, like, as soon as he concedes, your SO5's humped.
Whereas Steve Mandanda and guys like that, there's always a chance they don't get a clean sheet. They might actually just get a 50-odd, 55 score.
Mandanda against PSG last week was like a masterclass in goalkeeping.
And if people listen to our podcast, the Sorare Odyssey, or they subscribe to our Patreon, they would have had Steve Mandanda a long, long time ago. One of the most impressive goalkeepers in a very impressive team. But again, Quinny, the last thing I'll say about this, Celtic, Carter Vickers, Starfelt and Joe Hart would be my 3 picks for this game if I had those players. I've only got one limited, but that would be my 3. And then I'd stick a couple of superstars at another club up front elsewhere, because I've got the heebie-jeebies, but that's just me. But I think Celtic win 2-0, 3-0, comfortable.
What about you, McBride? Who's your couple of players for the game, or what players are you going to target in this game?
I think I would just do my usual strategy and just put as many Celtic teams out as possible.
On different combinations. Yeah. This is what you guys can do. This is just I'm envious.
I think I've not really had a look at what else is on at the moment, but All-Star Super Rare, I might just roll out the full stack, but we've got more options just now because you've got MLS back, you've got K-League and stuff like that. So I might fire in Cezinha or something up front and run, because I can run one in the Challenger Super Rare and one in the All-Star, which is a nice position to be in. So I'll probably base it around the defence and then maybe run one full stack and fire a couple.
So in defence,
your average Celtic fans
would you
getting
put,
exposed to Cezinha.
who would your defence be?
I would go for Hart, Starfelt and Vickers, but I've got super rares, all of them, so I can go like the 3, and then Furuhashi's always tempting because I've got his unique, so if he bangs, then obviously because you've got the unique, that's a nice wee differential. And I've got O'Reilly's unique, so if I hear that Hatate's out, I might even actually go O'Reilly unique and then fire Cezinha or something up front.
I'll need to put that crying face mask, no, the smiling face mask on. Kyogo uniques.
I know it's quite.
It's brilliant.
It's
so happy for you.
The thing is, when you hit, Quinny will know this because obviously he's got McGregor, but the day McGregor hit a big score, Quinny was right up there. And the advantage of having some Celtic uniques is when you hit, then you're not worrying about like Unlimited, where there's 200 other guys that have got Jota or anything. Like when they hit, you're right up there. So you still got to get it right, but like sometimes I'm a bit rigid with it, and people might think, it might be better if you put this guy or that guy in, but there's a sort of strategy around that as well, where you've got a certain stack, and when it hits, that like other guys just can't really beat you because there is only like 2 Furuhashi uniques, and obviously there's only 1 Matt Riley at the moment. So,
What about you, Mark? Patrick Rare, cards for the weekend you're looking at targeting?
On a lesser level to McBride, I think I'll be mixing it up with rares and limiteds of Celtic. I think I wasn't 100% sure about Starfelt after that. Ange had been talking up Kobayashi, but I think probably I would put out a stack of. I'd probably go Hradecki. I took Hradecki instead of Hart for the reasons that you mentioned. They're playing Schalke away this week, so I'd probably put Hradecki in goals with Starfelt, Carter Vickers, McGregor, and Furuhashi would be my. I don't know where I would place it, but that'd probably be my best shot at it, I would say.
Nice. I think I'm kind of doing something similar to you guys. For the most part, I'm trying to get away from my Joe Hart goalkeeper cards from my biggest team. But I think for anyone that is mad enough to still be listening to the show at this point, I think the best 5 scorers, I'll make a wee bold prediction at this, right? Obviously, you'd have Joe Hart in goals. But I think for defence, if you could pick any 2 Celtic defenders, I think that's probably the way to go for this game. I would take Carter Vickers and I would take Taylor. I think O'Reilly is probably in for the shot of being best scoring midfielder in this match. And I think, like we've already said throughout the show, if you've got any pick of the strikers, you want Jota. And, all these guys I've mentioned, none of them have went away for internationals. They've all been relatively fit and healthy. A lot of the other members of the squad, maybe they've had some travel, maybe there is some question marks, like we've said. And again, like we've referenced multiple times in the show, there's nothing worse than not getting a guy starting. It just kills your mood. Even if they are dangerous from the bench, you want to see them start, and I think all 5 of those guys walk onto the team. And if we score a couple of goals, we win the match, then that team's probably going to be pretty high rolling.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yep.
Well, guys, hail, and good luck this game week.
Good luck, guys. Good luck.
Match is about to kick off.